Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk.
Dr. Michael Rapici, how are you doing this morning?
Dr. Barry Falk. I'm doing really well today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I wonder if our listeners can tell the difference between the nighttime episodes and the morning episodes.
No,
I feel really caffeinated today.
Well, I think there's also a difference between the semester's almost over episodes and the.
Can they tell that difference?
I can. Listeners? I can. So, anyways, good morning. How are you? You're well.
I'm doing very, as you can tell already. I'm excited to be here and excited right out of the box to talk about
full of beans out of the box
about today. Yes.
Well, this is exciting. Today we are starting an arbitrary season 3 of the podcast, where we're going to really start turning our focus in the upcoming episodes to sort of the human aspect of critical media studies and start looking at questions of friendship, companionship, connection, alienation, loneliness. So it's a new chapter with a more human focus. And we're getting ready to start with Kazuo Ishiguro's novel, Klara and the Sun. And so, Barry, I'm going to turn it over to you in terms of first thoughts and synopsis, and then we'll jump into the deep end.
Michael, is it okay? I want to, I don't want to slow us down, but I was wondering if I could ask you a question about your introduction here and about your introductory plan.
That's it. Let's go.
You said that we're focusing. We should explain to listeners what we mean by arbitrary. Our reason, arbitrary season, number one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Arbitrary, not in the sense that we just decided to do this, but that in podcast land where
maybe
that was podcast language, and I just wanted to unpack.
No, that's fair. Yes, yeah. I apologize. No, meaning really that I think the entire idea of sort of seasonal demarcations is kind of silly.
Is
because
arbitrary. It's a convention.
Barry and I have never really sat down and figured out what exactly a season means. So we have decided.
But we do have a theme. But what you're saying is that we do have a theme that we're going to explore in different modalities for the next couple of episodes. Yeah, and we're going to do something. Maybe now I'll pick up and directly answer your question. So we're going to address certain themes, and we're going to do something a little bit different from us, which is also what you signaled, that we tend to, and I wanted to ask your opinion about this. I especially feel this way, I guess, because of, or rather, this is probably on both of our minds, because we just finished a two episode discussion of Marshall McLuhan's The Medium is the Mass Age. And so I guess there was a lot of talking about technology, discussion of technology for technology's sake. Right. I mean, you think that's kind of fair. And that kind of is and would you agree with this? That's kind of been the critical media studies groove thing. I mean, we probably do talk about technology and its relation to other technology, and we talk about the human interface, but what we're going to talk about more specifically, what we want to shine a focus on or a spotlight on is in this next couple of episodes. So there's going to be, despite the different modalities and texts, we think there's a single focus. We're going to shine the spotlight on the ways in which technology inflects, affects, effects. Can it effect? I don't know. Let's move on. Human interactions. And the ways in which emotional states or affective states seem to be constructed or enmesh with technological developments, especially the development or invention of new technology. So that's going to be the theme. And then when we think about the human emotions, it's going to seem like, we recovered or we're returning to the existential moment, because we're going to be thinking a lot about how individuals relate to other individuals in the mode of friendship, what kinds of relationships are enabled or disabled by technology. That's going to be the larger theme. And we're going to do something a little bit, so that's a little bit out of character for us, because we rarely talk about the human side because of our, you know why, Michael? I mean, let's just say it, because of our marked inhumanity and anti-humanity. We rarely talk about it, but we're going to try to change pace here.
Yeah, I think just to again to sort of
Yeah, please.
contextualize the thinking,
Mhm.
for me, I have an interest in Latour and network studies, and
Mhm.
the driving idea behind something like actor network theory is that we remove human agency and we treat the human as simply a
Absolutely.
node in a network. And
Absolutely.
what we're doing, what we're going to try and do now is really take a look at and you would use the word, the emotional state, really look at the human actors in this,
Mhm.
human technological tapestry as humans, and think about what is happening on the flip side of of a lens like McLuhan, or a lens like Latour, or a
Mhm.
lens like Law, to really try and inject sort of an emotional focus.
Mhm.
And that's what appeals to
Yeah.
me about this is it's a pretty radical shift from one perspective, but at the same time we're staying in exactly the same place, just looking at it differently.
I thank you for that nuance. I'll just add one more thing, and I'm going to segue to our topic for today, Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Um, I would say that I'm going to make a prediction. Although we are shifting, as you just mentioned, in our focus to a discussion of human subjectivity, human emotion, human affect, I fear or I anticipate, I don't know, I don't fear, but I anticipate, I prophesy that that none of these episodes, even though we're going to be focusing on the human in isolation or subjectivity, human subjectivity in certain
I think
modes,
that's it.
even though we're doing that, here's my prediction. We'll see how it goes. My prediction is that we're going to find out it's not going to be very easy to recover a older, traditional, unencumbered notion of the human when, even as we focus on it, right? It's not like all of a sudden we have discovered the human and we're going to recover it by talking about these things. I think we're going to see that the human, I don't know, I won't say any more, but I don't know if there's any there. Is I suspect that's what we'll find. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, shall we? Let's stay at the matter. Let's stay on the matter at hand. And today's this is probably the first of two episodes on Kazuo Ishiguro's Nobel Prize winner, Kazuo Ishiguro's novel, most recent novel, Klara and the Sun. And we're going to talk about literature, but we're mainly going to talk about literature uh, as illuminated by the kind of questions and concerns that animate us on this podcast, which is, basically the technological human interface. That said, in a novel that is narrated by an artificial intelligence, one
Right.
of the things that Klara, the AF, the artificial friend, who is purchased for Josie. More about the plot in a moment, and then we'll move on from the plot. But one of the characteristic features of the AI that narrates this tale, Klara, one of her characteristic features is an intuitive. Yeah, can I say that? I said intuitive, but can can AI have intuitions? How about this? She has a programmed interest in understanding what she cannot see, what is unable for anyone to see, which is the mechanisms of the human heart and mind, right? So she's programmed to care about human affective states, she is profoundly concerned. In fact, her only, would you say this is right, Michael? Clara's abiding concern is whether her charge, the young teenager that's in her charge, Josie, her abiding concern, her sole concern, her religious concern. I don't think I'm going too far to call it a theological or religious concern. is to care for and therefore to understand the emotional underpinnings of the teenager in her charge. So that's kind of, I'm trying to describe the relationship. I'll talk about the plot very briefly in a moment.
I think that's a good way of starting the discussion. I think that I want to certainly come back to what Klara's,
We will.
Her driving motivation is, but that's fair.
We will. And right now, I'll stay on the surface here. I can tell we're both eager to dig into the deeper issues here, but staying on the surface, that was a characterization of the relationship between, I guess, the key relationship, arguably in the book, the relationship between a human being, Josie, and a robot, a child companion who is bought and sold, manufactured, bought and sold in order to be a child companion. And staying on the surface, one more just sort of general summary. I'm sure that in this episode and the next episode, we will, more plot points are going to come up. But as I mentioned earlier, this isn't going to be book club as much as we're going to try to use Ishiguro's novel as a sort of portal or way to frame some of the issues about the technological human interface that interests us, right? But anyway, plot summary, which I am going to read from a wonderfully insightful article by Yu-Ching Sun entitled Posthuman Post slash, got to have the slash there, Michael. Got to have that slash. Post slash human perfectibility in the technological other in Kazuo Ishiguro's Klara and the Sun. We'll be talking about, I'm sure that we'll be talking about this essay, more of its points in the next episode, but we're going to kind of stay on the surface of the ice here. But I wanted to read Sun's excellent plot summary. One bit of teaser, though, that I have to digress upon very, very briefly. It's both a digression and a teaser. Post-human perfectibility. Michael, one of the great insights in Sun's article that I just want to flag it now that we want to return to is that Sun relates the book and a lot of things, actually the history of AI, to a larger narrative about technology and in particular ideology. And I'll say very briefly what the ideology is. So Sun's point is that the best way to not just understand this novel, but just to understand AI is that you have to understand AI within this broader framework of a post-enlightenment project designed or devoted to human perfectibility, to the creation of a so-called master race, which is another theme, as Sun points out, of Ishiguro's books. But that gets us into the weeds. We're not going to go there, but that's a teaser for next week. Let me go to the plot summary. Klara and the Sun. Ishiguro is affecting, also from Yu-Ching Sun. Klara and the Sun. Ishiguro's affecting story of child companionship between a human being, Josie, and a robot, Klara, is another of Ishiguro's reflections on the illusions of mastery. Here's the more, and that's getting into a philosophical point that we'll unpack a little bit more. We'll return to in the next episode. But let me get directly to a very helpful, I hope, to listeners who haven't read the book. And of course, everyone's homework assignment is to read the book. Go read the book immediately between these episodes. What else do you have to do, right? Okay, anyway, plot summary. Klara and the Sun chronicles the story of child companionship between a human being, Josie, and a robot, Klara. Created as an AF, I just taught this book, and I have to say, we did get a lot of chuckles, a lot of sophomore chuckles out of Klara being an AF. Ha ha. Yeah, I know. That's the kind of sophomore stuff that you can guarantee is going to be in Dr. Falk's class. So get me fired. You could get me fired. Very easy. Just a little letter. All it takes is a letter. I'm not going to solicit you to. I'm not going to solicit our listeners to do that, but maybe they would be doing me a favor. Anyway, back to the plot summary. Created as an artificial friend, AF, that's the designation for humans, Klara is selected to befriend Josie, who is undergoing, and this is the first of the many terms, very interesting terms that Ishiguro invents to sort of describe this new world, this world that's like our own, but not like quite like our own, that he describes in the novel, to befriend Josie, who is undergoing lifting, quote unquote, which is a I don't know, a euphemism for genetic engineering process for children who are going to be lifted and lifted basically outside of their class above another class of people. And final bit of the summary. Soon after coming to Josie's, I lost my page. Soon after coming to Josie's family, Klara is told that she will eventually be substituting, another euphemism word, for Josie, who appears to be nearing her life's end. Josie has, and this is the abiding concern of Josie and certainly Josie's mother, that Josie seems to have been kind of in disrepair or ailing since she was genetically lifted, right? Seems like as a side effect of that surgery, she's never quite recovered from it. And that's one of the reasons why she needs a companion, and to lift her spirits, because Josie senses, and certainly Josie's mother senses, that she's, about to die, on death's doorstep or precariously close to dying, as her sister dies, before the events in the novel transpire. However, and this is sort of a key to the novel, Klara spares no efforts to save Josie. She's programmed to. She's programmed to be an AF, artificial friend. So, of course, she spares no efforts. In fact, sacrificing herself in this interesting, very Baroque, kind of creepy, freaky, theological subtext where, and I'll unpack this and I'll shut up with the plot summary, just to, this other motif, because it's a major motif in the novel. So Klara is not programmed with much of a knowledge of, the prehistory of the human race, obviously, or where AFs come from, but she knows that she's solar powered. And and what's interesting, so many interesting things in this book. I'm so excited to talk about it and so excited to hear Michael's thoughts. But one of the interesting things for me in the book is that, I don't know what this means, but Ishiguro seems to implies, I think, I don't think he seems to imply, I think he directly implies that there is this kind of innate, even in programming, even in artificial intelligence, there's this kind of innate desire to respect your life source. So that Klara, as soon we see in the beginning of the book when we're introduced to Klara understands that she, where she is, she's on display in the store. She realizes that if you're in the main part of the store with good lighting, where you can receive sun rays, you feel this kind of vibrancy and power. She realizes that her life energy depends on solar power. She sees and basically constructs this episode where she feels the sun also had this other enabling effect, had a curative effect on a homeless person that she sees outside the window. And so she automatically makes this connection between the sun. She starts treating the sun as basically God, in the sense that the logical conclusion is that the source of your life source is a Godhead, a God term. And so as soon as she's introduced to Josie and realized that Josie has a problem with her programming, right, with her infrastructure, Klara intuitively makes this move that somehow the sun and solar power is going to be the key in some way. If I can petition the sun, if I can enlist the sun's power, I will be able to fix Josie's problems in the same way that the sun gives me life and energy. I didn't mean to go so much into that. That's a sub theme in the book, but it's an interesting sub theme, and I guess I had to justify my digression there. I had to talk about it to explain the title, but I've gone on too long, Michael. I wanted to pass it on to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I'm going to try and offer just a very
Or
quick
summary. Yeah, please do.
plot summary just to put everybody on the same page. So, Klara is the AF who is narrating the story. And it starts, she's in a store patiently waiting to be adopted or brought home, right? Josie shows up, says, I'm coming back to get you. Klara gets excited. Klara is an inferior model, though. There is
Very
a model.
important.
There is a model that has been released after Klara's construction, that is supposedly better than Klara. At any rate, Josie and her mother come and get Klara and take her home, and her task is to be a friend and companion to Josie, who is ill and dying because she is having a negative response to being lifted. There is a boy that lives next door to Josie, who is a sort of childhood friend / love interest, but
there's a crucial gap between.
But he has not been lifted.
Yeah, right.
And they have this, but yet they have, and they both know this obviously because he hasn't had the surgery that she has. Smart kid, but doesn't have the credential of being lifted next to him. So he has a different struggle of trying to find his way into, successful, productive society. So at a certain point, they feel like Josie may not make it. Josie's mom asks Josie point blank, right? Can you play Josie? And then it's revealed that part of the plan all along was to have Klara become Josie. Like they've made a new skin for her. And she will inhabit this version of Josie and somehow then be a daughter AF to the mom who has now lost 2 children.
So that's, yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Josie gets sick. Klara prays to the sun, makes a deal with the sun. And then skipping very quickly through the tulips here, Josie is healed by the sun and Klara is discarded, but not disconnected or dismantled, just discarded.
In a very creepy, I mean, we'll talk, yeah, I'm sure next week we'll talk about
we'll get to it. So
it's hard. I'll say in advance, it's very emotionally affecting. It's very emotionally affecting, but I'm not quite sure. This is something I'll have to be thinking about in the next week or two. I'm not quite sure what to make of the ending and how we are, the reader, is supposed to, is meant to respond to Klara's languishing.
I think that's, so I had to read the ending. I read it and I was like, what just happened? And went back and read it again and said, okay, I understand what just happened, but I can't fully comprehend or digest.
I have that same feeling too. So
I feel like that's a discussion that is going to depend. That's a discussion whose conclusion is going to depend upon, I think, how we read this. So I think that's probably best left for next time.
Indeed.
So I have just a question. So first of all, fair summary?
I think fair summary. There was something you said that I was just going to add one little plot detail.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the clock here so I don't go too long. But when you alluded to the major plot thread, we find out, I mean, I'm going to be lit crit guy just for a second. The novel is, I guess, only his second speculative, Ishiguro is only maybe his only a second exercise in speculative fiction. Never Let Me Go might be the other one, right? But one of the pleasures, if you've read other Ishiguro's novels, one of the pleasures of Klara and the Sun is that he does his usual narrative shenanigans, machinations in this novel that he does in all of his other novels. So here's what tell me if you think this is a fair description. And I think This is a literary digression, but I think it's a kind of important thing to understand if you do read the book, which we encourage you to do. Um, this is kind of Ishiguro's groove thing. Here's how he loves to tell stories like this. He'll give you a narrator. The narrator is at various points unconscious, clueless about their situation. In their estimation, the world in which they inhabit is this beautiful, amazing, almost perfect world. And the world in which these characters serve, usually, and I use that word advisedly, usually, I mean, there's a big structural analogy between Klara and the Sun and Remains of the Day in this respect. The character who's narrating it is in service to other characters, and there is never a question in the narrator's mind that the world in which the narrator inhabits is beautiful and beneficent.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover, the person that the main character lives to serve is a paragon, a god on earth. So this is, like I said, this is Ishiguro's groove thing. He loves to write stories like this. So you're reading the first, I'm sure this was your experience, Michael. How could it not have been? You read the first 20, 30 pages and you think, did I stumble into a young adult fiction? What's going on here? Is this a kid's book? What kind of beautiful idyllic world is this? Is this a child story? But what happens, and this is Ishiguro's not just his groove thing, it's his mastery, is that gradually as you go along, you find out, you see people, if you read the clues, but you have to be an attentive reader, you get clues from the discourse of the others who surround the narrator. And you get clues, hey, maybe this world isn't so good. And in fact, in Klara and the Sun, I think it goes like this. First 30 pages, you think, oh, this is an interesting world. This character seems to have a very sunny, for an AF, maybe because she's an AF, a very sunny disposition. But this world is interesting. And obviously, there are some very happy, contented people in this world. Then it gets by 100, by 100, 150, you realize, oh, there's a lot of darkness.
So let me ask you a question about this, because I want to get into some of the questions that are being posed. And as you were talking earlier, I've been scribbling responses frantically. I'm
okay. Well,
I'm loaded for bear here. But I'm going to ask you, don't answer this immediately. But my question for you is really, what kind of book has Ishiguro written?
Yeah.
And to the point you just made,
okay.
There are six sections to the book, right?
Indeed.
And for the first three, I was reading along saying, okay. Now I've read Never Let Me Go, and I had a very similar reaction to that as I did this. At a certain point here, the very beginning of book 4, where you realize what Chrissy, Josie's mom, has had planned, I stopped and was like, oh my God. And this is interesting because it's going to point to, I'm curious as to your response to this, because I think it's going to speak to sort of Ishiguro's vision and purpose, and then like sort of the nature of our interactions with technologies. I put it down like, oh my God, this is the creepiest of horror stories I have read in a very long time.
Right.
And what makes it even more so, like if you think about the characters of Never Let Me Go, that's terrifying. And that's a horrible existence. Like when the veil is pierced and you realize that, oh my God, this is not this sunny, idyllic life. What's terrifying about this is that you have this Klara character who is built to serve, built to make things better, and is the central piece in this terrifying concept, who is telling you this story, right? She is the narrator who's taking through it, and who is ultimately, literally soulless. She's this completely, you feel for her. You empathize with her. She has done her job for Josie, and she is doing her job for you, the reader.
Absolutely.
And you are being led by a soulless, heartless, non-entity, which, well, I don't know that may be going a step too far, but non-human entity whose inhumanity becomes absolutely apparent at the moment where she is most emotionally necessary. And so I'm going to stop, because if I start, it's going to take me a long time to get to a break point. But what is this book?
Well, I mean, I think I think we already remember I said I predicted that we're going to talk about the human, but then it's not going to be probably the human that we end up talking about is not going to be our parents' human or the traditional human. It's going to be something that's really shaky or in question, or that is difficult to comprehend, or seems to be extremely problematic. I think you just hit on, right? Because what did you say? Klara is the most inhuman character. I could easily, yes, I could easily flip that, though, and I think any reader of this book could flip that and say, nonetheless, the inhuman character is by, and this also was the subtext of the other novel that Ishiguro's other genetic engineering novel.
Never Let Me Go.
Yeah, Never Let Me Go. This is also the theme that the clones are more human, quote unquote, than the humans.
Yeah.
Likewise here. But what we realize is that Klara's observation and mimesis and attempt to replicate humanity makes her the most human person in this landscape. And one thing, now I'm sort of gesturing toward, maybe I'm answering your partially answering your question about what kind of book is this and what kind of world is Ishiguro portraying here? What world is he trying to portray here? I think we're probably going to shift and try to give some answers to that question. But just on this particular topic, one of the things I love about this book is that no one escapes. We find out, and I'm not going to linger on this, but we find out as we go through the book, it takes us a while, I think, before a reader can do this, but a reader can sort of backward form or backwards understand the politics of certain characters. We start seeing that certain life choices and decisions are the product of a particular, or they produce a particular kind of politics. Some characters, by the end of the book, we see are recognizably conservative, and some characters we see are, according to our mapping of politics, recognizably liberal. But one of the, I think, powerful things about this book is that the politics, in a sense, once we can identify the politics of the characters, the political differences don't matter in comparison with this basic nexus of, or the basic question of humanity versus inhumanity. And the inhuman character seems to have the best politics of all. And she has, of course, no politics.
So you read this as, okay.
Well, maybe this is something we can discuss. I sense you disagree with that reading.
No, not at all. But would you call this then, I mean, is this a political text?
Oh, I think there's definitely a political text. I think this is definitely a political text. I think he is I think he definitely has a political agenda in this, and a political agenda. And let me flag this: we're going to capsize the episode if I go too much into this. So I'll just put a pin in. I'll say it and I'll put a pin in it, because I know we'll end up talking about it, if not in this episode, next episode.
That's fair.
But I think there is a political point. There is his critique of technology and humanity, or how the human technology interface or interconnection, I think, has an implicit politics. and by politics I don't mean that he's voting Republican or
No.
Democrat, but there is a political an overt political point, which is, I think, a critique of meritocracies, a critique of elites. Now, critique of elites, as we know, can be a right-wing thing, it could be a
Can
left
I
wing.
ask? Can I ask you a question about something? I'm sorry to step in here,
But does that mean?
but
Do you understand what I mean by merit? Am I clear what I mean by
I do.
meritocracies?
But I
Yeah,
have a question for you, and this
yeah.
could just be a plot point that I miss.
All
But
right.
there is certainly a distinction that the human characters fear between
Indeed, indeed,
being lifted and being
indeed,
unlifted, to the
indeed.
point where you have a couple who has lost a child to this process and is willing to double down and go again.
That's a really important point.
But here's the question is, and again, I'm just asking for clarification because perhaps I missed it, is being lifted, is the ability to be lifted
Mm-hmm.
determined by your bank account and your ability to afford the surgery? Because it doesn't seem to me that it is. Like the character of Rick,
Tell
who
me
is
more.
not lifted, who is
Yeah.
not lifted, right?
Yes.
The character. So just for quick orientation, for those of you who haven't read it, excuse me. Chrissy is Josie's mother. Helen is Rick's mother.
Indeed.
The men are not absent, but largely irrelevant to this. So you have two children who grew up next to each other. We know that Chrissy's mom has a professional position of some importance or significance.
Indeed.
And their house.
But that's crucial, I would say.
It is.
Answering your idea, and I'm partly answering your question.
And I think
the fact that she is affluent it matters a lot.
Right. Whereas Helen, Rick's mother, was an actress, was an artsy person. Their house, though next door, is that they live in relative squalor compared to Josie and Chrissy. Indeed. So it seems,
and Klara notices that when she travels on the occasions she travels,
notices but doesn't pass judgment on it.
Doesn't pass judgment, right?
So
that her
so the question, but it seems to me that Josie and Rick could be they're really not that different. I'm of the opinion here that the ability to be lifted, like you don't have to take some sort of test to be cleared to be lifted.
True.
It's, do you have the means to pay for the surgery to be lifted?
Indeed.
So that's it. There is no, it's not a case of taking children with promise and elevating them.
Oh yeah. No, it's can you afford to be lifted?
That's it.
The thing. That's the thing. And in fact, yeah, I don't know. I sense we had a disagreement, but we don't have a disagreement.
No.
Yeah. I mean, here's how I understand it. I think we're on the same page.
Yeah.
We got the same thing from the book. To be lifted, and this is, like I said, there is I think an implicit, this is relevant to what I was describing as Ishiguro's political position, which is a general critique and suspicion of elites. Yes. And the elite in this particular case, let's use those two families. There isn't that much of a class difference.
No, they're friends.
They're friends. So you're right to think that there was one family that made a choice and another family that didn't. And making the socially approved choice makes a big difference for Josie and Josie's mom. And so there's that. But as to this being a critique of elites, I would still say it is a critique of meritocracy and elites, because all those families, there's one family that didn't choose to have, a mother who chose not to have her child genetically engineered and lifted, and a mother who did, who doubles down, is your important term. That's what we see in this novel. Josie's mother doubles down. But if they didn't have money, the events in this novel would not have taken place. Klara would not have been introduced unless. So that to me is the critique. This is what the privileged elites can do. The privileged elites, one of the jobs of privileged elites, Michael, let's not. I think Ishiguro would agree with this. One of the jobs of privileged elites is that not everybody can be in the privileged elite club.
Right.
So one of the things you want to do to make sure that you're in the club is get some other MFers the F out of it, right? You got to get them out of there. That's how you know you're in the privileged elite. So I would think this is a novel that shows us what elites do with technology. And insofar as it's an illustration of that, I think Ishiguro is kind of continuing, if you're familiar with his other novels, he's kind of continuing a long-standing criticism of elites and aristocracies.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, a would-be aristocracy enabled by science. So there's a kind of continuity with his work. But in this, just reading this novel on its own, I think there's a criticism of human presumption, the presumption and the privilege that it requires. Put it out, I can say it in a sentence, and I wish I had, so I didn't take up so much time. Privilege, we use the word privilege now.
Mm-hmm.
That's just another word for lift.
For what?
For lifted.
Okay.
His term for the families that are lifted. It's what we would call, and what we do call with a criticism, usually as a invective. We say, well, you're acting out of privilege.
Okay.
It's a way of maintaining privilege. And I think the critique of privilege, there's a critique of people who get lifted, who want to get lifted, who like Chrissy, double down on getting lifted.
I'm going to push.
I know you're going to push back because you don't think he takes any.
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't think the critique here is against the people who are lifted. I think this is an important distinction, actually. I don't sense that there is any sort of critique against Klara. I think the critique is against the people who would choose this.
Yeah. Did I put Klara? I was talking about the humans, not Klara.
But it's no. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Not true. I don't think. Pardon me. I spoke poorly here. But it speaks to how effective Klara is as a character of course. I don't think the critique is against Josie. And there's a scene where Josie says, I wouldn't have wanted another mother and I wouldn't have wanted things differently. Like Josie is fully on board with this. I think is. I think
and you think that's not criticism? Oh,
no, I don't. I think the criticism here is against Chrissy. I look at Josie and I say, this is, and it's interesting because in a way, I think Josie now fills the space between someone like Rick, and I'm thinking about in terms of class here, and someone like Chrissy, because I read Josie as being a very human character who wants really one thing, and she wants connection. And I think when push comes to shove and she realizes that she's facing her own mortality because of this, you see that she is scared. I mean, she says, she's like, I don't want to die.
I don't want to die. And Klara picks up on that.
Yes, she knows
that's a revelatory
moment for her first pivot, there's never a sense of anger or frustration towards her mother. Her mother is this distant, and I see it's funny because this gets us to the question of, well, where is this book set? And when is this book set? Because I read this as a very Japanese book where the phrasing about the clothing and the rank and everything, where Josie's mom was this grinding character in a Japanese work system which dominates your life and severs this ability to emotionally connect. And so I read Josie as this heartbreaking child who was literally willing to accept her parents' moves, not because she agrees with them, but because she so desperately wants human connection.
Sure.
That, because you see a number of places where Klara is relegated to the corner. Klara is relegated to, because there is this need for a human connection. And Josie is willing to say, look, Mom, I love you more than anything. And I think this was good. Not so much because she does, but because what a child wants is connection, what this innocence of childhood is willing to believe that whatever the generation above you has done must necessarily be for your own good.
Beautifully put.
And so I mean, she is the most tragic of characters. I don't think that Ishiguro is looking at her. I think if you want to make this a political statement, Ishiguro is looking at the people who might believe that technology exists for their benefit.
Of course.
And
I agree.
willingly and eagerly goes along.
I totally concur.
I kind of just broke my own heart there, by the way.
I was about to say you're there's not a dry eye in the Zoom room at this point.
No, nor will there be later when my kids come home and I take every single tablet and streaming device away from them because
improv moment here that we'll do in public. I like the energy of what we talked about here. I'm going to propose that we stop while we are, to my benighted view, ahead. But I wanted to end with a little bit of a teaser and also a way of, oh no, you have some. Well, I'll pass it to you to. I'm going to do a final comment. I'm going to do a final comment, and then I want to hear your final comment.
Suspend your final comment for just a moment. I want to return to a question you asked at the very beginning that I have been dying to unpack.
Okay.
So you had said that this book, and this is what we've sort of been talking about here, asks the questions, is there such a thing as oh my God, my handwriting is horrible. Is there any such a thing? Just basically as a human, as an
unfiltered, I don't know, integral, I guess is the word, human.
That's fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna spend the rest of the day trying to.
What is your? And you're going to ask.
So what? I wanted to just kind of go through some of the moves that Ishiguro makes in terms of answering this. If we could spend just 2 minutes,
please do,
looking at this. So I think in the naming conventions and the way things play out here, right? It's this idea of an artificial friend. Indeed. Implicit in that statement is this idea that it is not a genuine friend or not an authentic friend. So we want to place humanity at the center of things, right? Say this is artificial, this isn't real, but yet we come to see that Klara still manages artificially to fill that role. And indeed, Klara's role here is to represent or to somehow not be like Josie, but to be Josie. And so the quest, Klara is essentially processing in ones and zeros. That's what she's doing, right? So we're trying to really quantify what it is, quantify and then recreate the essence of what it is to be human and to connect. And I think that what this book is really trying to push, so I'm going to get us to the question of sort of what kind of novel it is here, right? Is where really are the boundaries between what it is to be human and what it is to be technological? And I don't think that boundary exists anymore. You look at what I find funny is I said I read this as a horror story, and I also read it as sort of a like a postmodern religious,
very much so,
story.
I did too. I did as well, simultaneously.
What does it mean that the son, who is Klara's deity, who gives her life, is also the thing that ultimately saves the mostly human character who is fighting for her existence because of this technological invasion, right?
I think that's a question that we should address, and I think we will address it next time. So I'm gonna veer from answering that part of your question, but we had a mind meld moment. I think we are reaching closure because I'm going to do two things. First thing, you asked the question. I'm going to give a very brief answer. Try to give a very brief answer to your um, great question of what kind of novel this is, or what's one of the aims of this novel. What's Ishiguro's aim in presenting this world? I think you are using the terms that I would use to sort of characterize and describe the novel. It's a speculative fiction. I'm going to try to recall the terms you just used because I think they were perfect. It's speculative fiction that is meant to investigate the boundary points between the human and the non-human.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant to investigate that boundary point. And I think that one of the purposes of the book is to, Ishiguro's purpose is to, at the same time that there is I won't hold back or won't take back my idea, my argument that there's a political critique that's very much rooted in contemporary social reality. At the same time, the speculative aspect of this book is bigger than that critique of meritocracies and elites. Mm-hmm. It's this investigation, and I think you marvelously put the terms of the investigation that Ishiguro is conducting. He's speculating he's planted a novel on that boundary, where he has to explore the limits of the human or the interface. If there is a border, he's trying to investigate, trying to figure out, is there a border? Or can we even imagine a border between the human and the non-human? And here's why I was saying earlier, I think we reached the end, because we had another mind melt moment. I wanted to read this passage, which I think is a kind of key passage in the book on page 43, and it's one paragraph. But I think it's one of the key places where Ishiguro kind of flags, where the narrative kind of flags that, hey, the narrative kind of flags Ishiguro's intent to, hey, I want you to think about what distinguishes, or whether we can distinguish, the human from the AF, the human from the non-human. So this is a passage, and I think this is exactly, this passage gestures to exactly what you were talking about, Michael. So I'll read it very briefly. Set the scene. This is the scene where the manager, and it's interesting, the manager is never given a name, right? It's just the manager. She's a god term too, right?
Mm-hmm.
For Klara. So the manager is speaking, I think, to Josie's mom, or is it speaking directly to? Yes, no, it's speaking directly to Josie's mom. I'll read a little bit of this dialogue, but I think it's totally pertinent to what we've been talking about, especially Michael, which you were just, the questions you just raised a moment ago. Okay, here we go. Mom, says Josie, Klara is the one I want. I don't want any other. One moment, Josie. Then she asks manager, Klara's narrative. Every artificial friend is unique, right? That's correct, ma'am, says manager, and particularly so at this level. Michael, what does that mean at this level? At this make? I
think model. I think
the
because,
model.
Yeah.
Okay. So what makes this one unique? Josie's mom, Chrissy, asks. So what makes this one unique? This, and I guess she's looking at her name tag, Klara. This paragraph is the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me read it, and I have one observation, and I'm dying to hear what you say. Klara has so many unique qualities. We could be here all morning, talking about the unique qualities of this individual AF, right? There's the paradox. But if I had to emphasize just one, well, it would have to be her appetite for observing and learning. Bear with me here, Michael. I have a question for you. Her ability to absorb and blend everything she sees around her is quite amazing. As a result, she now has the most sophisticated understanding of AF in this store. B3's the higher model that
It's
you were
the newer model,
earlier,
right?
not accepted. Is that so? Says mother. Okay, here's what I said to my class about this passage. I'm curious whether you agree. So this is where one paradox here is that the manager is saying, okay, Klara, she's an AF, so she's a great model. But then she goes on to make these claims that this model is extraordinary for being more human. I think for having the qualities of humanity that other models do not share. And then here's what I observed to my class, and I freaked them out, or I freaked them out maybe just for me. Thing. I said, look at those, let's itemize those qualities. A talent for observing, a talent for learning, an ability to absorb and blend elements in a context, a sophisticated understanding of a context. Oh my goodness. Who else has that skills? Kazuo Ishiguro as a novelist. That's what novelists do. That's what narrators do. Any narrator in any fiction. That's why I said this is what qualifies or credentials Klara to tell a novel. Is that that's all you need for the programming that we call novels.
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you have is there a question?
I mean, that totally, yeah. So I'm passing it to you, but I just want to say, look at that passage. It blends and blurs the human and non-human.
Well, right? I'll go a step further even. I'm going to continue just 3 or 4 lines down from where you finished. And I think this is an important addendum to your point. Not accepted. I think, is that so? The mother was once again looking at me with narrowed eyes. This is Klara speaking. She then took 3 more steps towards me. You mind if I ask her a few questions? That's directed toward the manager. Please go ahead. Mom, please. Josie's trying to interrupt here. Excuse me, Josie, just stand over there a moment while I talk to Klara, which is exactly what Klara has to do in the house. Josie at this point has been relegated to the side, right?
Indeed. That's an important moment.
Yeah. Then it was the mother and me. And though I had tried to keep a smile on my face, it was not easy. And I might even have let the fear show. Not only is she intuitive and observant, she is emotional. She worries that her emotional state will betray her physical state. So there is a humanity to the technology, which is unquestionably on par with, and then mother says, right? Klara, the mother said, I want you to not look towards Josie. Now tell me without looking, what color are her eyes? They're gray, ma'am. Right. So she's wildly observant. You get this later with the socializing thing that has to be done, which is something we will absolutely talk about.
Absolutely talk about next time.
About her ability to, as a machine, to capture everything. But there's a humanity to her, which in many ways surpasses the humanity of the human characters. So, yeah.
I can't think of a better way to end. There are many things left to explore, but we're going to have another episode, and we're going to bring in more maybe conceptual theoretical discourses next time. Yeah, but that's it. But we'll still be talking about Klara and the Sun. Michael, what a pleasure. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
This was a ton of fun. Thanks for introducing literature back into the the reading list. Yeah, we'll pick this up next time. Barry, have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Critical Media Studies podcast. To find out more about the show, check out our webpage at criticalmediastudiespodcast.com.